And it's the second day of the ANC's eThekwini Regional Conference in KwaZulu Natal. The announcement of the new regional leaders is expected to be made today. SABC News reporter Ayanda Mhlongo joins us now live from that conference, and she's joined by Kwazi Mshengu. But Ayanda, before you get to that interview, a massive delay. It seems the conference set to wrap up today, but credentials have not been adopted yet. It seems the Tabane Nyause slate is raising the issue of the voting rights of the ANC Women's League as well as the ANC Youth League. Tell us more.
Yeah, very good morning to you, Griselda, and good morning to our viewers at home. Certainly, Griselda, it was a long day and a long night for us, the members of the media, as well as the delegates attending this conference. You'd note that yesterday the conference was expected to start at 9 a.m. in the morning, only starting after 2 p.m. yesterday afternoon, and that was because the party was still trying to resolve this issue around the voting rights, as you've correctly said there, of the Women's League as well as the ANC Youth League. When the conference started, a statement was issued by the ANC to say that they had resolved and agreed that the members of the ANC Women's League would participate as voting delegates at this conference. And what then took a little bit longer was a resolution around the ANC Youth League. And what we eventually were told was that the ANC had decided that of the two lists that had been provided by the ANC Youth League, they would then allow for half of the delegates, meaning 6 from the one list and 6 from the other list. Then, of course, around the issue, as you said, the adoption of the credentials, it seems that is where the disputes have come from. The delegates here late last night. It was further delayed as there had to be an actual physical head count after some of the delegates raised the point that they were not happy with the fact that the delegates were only, as they entered the conference hall, were only had to show their accreditation as well as their ID books, and some felt that they needed to have been checked against the register to ensure that the voting delegates that were inside the conference were indeed those that were on the register. So that process took some time yesterday, and it had to go ahead twice, Griselda, to ensure that the right delegates were indeed inside the conference. That lasted way into the night. Woke up this morning to find that they're still not done with the issue around the credentials. Once again, the Tabanenya was the slate, as you've said, raising the issue that they're objecting to the Women's League's participation, arguing that the term of office of the Women's League had expired some time ago. In fact, the term of office is 18 months, and they are arguing that the Women's League structure has gone to 5 years and there has not been an interim structure. And they then, that matter has now been taken to the National Executive Committee for guidance. But to get more on this, let me now speak to the convener of the region, Mr. Kwazi Mshengu. Mr. Mshengu, thank you so much for your time. A long night. I know you had hoped yesterday that at least would have wrapped up everything in terms of the program for day one, which have meant that the votings would have done, and today would have been a matter of the announcement of the officials as well as the vote for the additional members. However, we're still stuck on credentials. Speak to us about where we are. We're told that once again one of the factions has raised the issue around the Women's League, the participation of the Women's League as well as the ANC Youth League. But also another matter that has come up is the voting rights of the members of the RTT.
It has been a very long night indeed, but it's important that we become patient with explaining certain things that are raised in the conference, so that we don't allow the conference to collapse on our hands because of rushing to arrive at decisions. That is why it took us from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. this morning discussing the credentials, and we're able to clarify all but one issues that were raised insofar as the credentials of the conference are concerned. And the only remaining issue really is the issue of the voting status of the RTT. There is a view that says the RTT should be voting. Now in KwaZulu Natal there is a PEC decision that regional task teams as appointed by the PEC cannot vote in regional conferences. You would know that when a PEC appoints a regional task team, it must also expressly confer certain powers as it deems fit. That is why even in the Constitution it's prescribed that regional executive committees also exercise delegated powers of the PEC, from the PEC. That is why the task team, when is appointed by the PEC, it must also express the powers that that task team must have. And the PEC has a decision that task teams should not vote. There have been about 7 conferences that have sat in the province. I think 5 of them had task teams, and all those task teams did not vote. But also, if you remember that in 2018, when we went to our provincial conference, we went with a task team that was led by Comrade Mabuya Kulu and Comrade Sigalal, and that task team did not vote. So there's a precedent in the province of KwaZulu Natal, but also there's a firm decision of the PEC which cannot be changed by this conference.
Mr. Mshengu, but some of the delegates are arguing that, for example, the KZN cannot take a decision that is not in line with the party, with the national decision. They've used the example of Mpumalanga province, saying that members of the PTT, the provincial task team there, were permitted to vote. And so they're saying that KZN can then not take its own decision, which is not in line with what has been decided by the National Executive Committee.
We are told that there is no decision of the NEC. And I think that's what compounds the problem, because it meant that each and every province does what it thinks is best. We have had regional conferences in this province before certain regional conferences in other provinces set, where they allowed the task teams. The national executive knew that in KwaZulu Natal were not allowing the task teams to vote, and they had no issue about that. It's only now really that I think from Mpumalanga in particular, where even the provincial task team was allowed to vote. But there is no national common decision that said task teams should be voting or should not be voting. So basically it was left to provinces. And the province of KwaZulu Natal exercised its right to say, as far as the task teams that we are appointing, we are not going to give them voting rights. And that has been the case. And we think that eThekwini should not be an exception to that.
But considering the fact that another province decides differently and KZN decides differently, do you are not concerned that this could open yourselves up to other regions, as you've mentioned, also now wanting to challenge their status and the fact that their RTTs were not able to vote? And in terms of the guidance given by the National Executive Committee, it really does seem that then there has not been much guidance. They've left the provinces to their own devices to decide for themselves, but this seemingly is presenting a challenge for you.
Indeed, and we're worried that it's going to make an ANC to appear like a federal organization, because there is no national decision. What national must do beyond these conferences is to take a clear-cut decision that from now henceforth, task teams are voting or they are not voting. What cannot happen is that KZN be bound by a decision of Mpumalanga. That cannot happen. KZN as a province can only be bound by a decision of the National Executive Committee, a decision that is non-existent at this point in time.
We are told now you're seeking guidance for the national leaders. Is that the case? And who exactly is now trying to resolve the situation for the province?
No, we're meeting as a steering committee. We'll be joined by the provincial secretary and the provincial chairperson to really try and resolve this particular issue in conference. So I'm not aware of a decision to consult the national leadership. So, but if the province feels that it is time to escalate the matter to national, I'm sure we can take that decision. But as it stands now, we believe that we are still capable to resolve this issue on our own as a province.
Until you're done, until the credentials have been adopted, you cannot proceed with this conference. Considering the situation at hand, what are the possibility and the likelihood that this conference will be able to continue and not collapse?
We do believe that the conference will continue. As we are about to start, we should be able again to open for a shorter period for further discussion and clarities, and we think that we'll be able to prevail to conference, because ultimately it must be the people of this region who benefit from this particular conference. We can't allow it to collapse, and we'll be pleading also with the conscience of cadres to say now at some points they must lose themselves for the organization to exist. And that's the point where we're in now. But we think we will be able to proceed and finish at least half of the business of conference, which will include voting. We will have loved for a conference to have more time for deliberation on the state of the organization here, on the state of governance. But obviously we have been overtaken by time, so some of the things we'll have to forgo.
Mshengu, thank you so much for your time, sir. Kwazi Mshengu, the convener of the eThekwini region there, Griselda, just taking us through, of course, what is going to happen now after this dispute that was raised by some members or some delegates attending this conference, saying that they want the members of the regional task team, and the regional task team, of course, was the task team that was put in place after the region was disbanded in 2018, and that was after the term of office of the leadership of the region had come to an end or expired. So it's just going to be, I suppose, a wait-and-see game, Griselda. Are they going to accept this decision by the province? It seems the province is firm that they have taken a decision that no regional task team, or the members rather of the regional task teams, will not be permitted to vote in these regions, and so they're saying that the decision has been taken. Other regions as well, task teams, they were unable, members of the task teams were unable to vote, and they cannot then change that decision when it comes to the eThekwini region. We've been speaking about this, Griselda, to speak about how high the stakes are at this conference. I can tell you the delegates are counting vote by vote. Each of the two factions have people that have been closely monitoring step by step, closely monitoring the delegates in this conference. So it is a question of a vote. We are told at the Moses Mabhida conference, the difference between the person who was elected chairperson and the person that they were contesting again was 5 votes. So a very, very narrow margin, though, just to show that here every vote counts, and these delegates are leaving nothing to chance. We're just going to have to wait and see. Of course, we will be here throughout the day, giving our viewers an update on what is happening here at the Durban ICC, day 2 of the ANC's eThekwini Regional Conference. Griselda?
Ayanda, thank you very much indeed. Monitoring events for us there on the second day of the eThekwini Conference.